Now, we start this morning by taking you back 20 years to 2001. On the 30th of July of that year, 24-year-old Louise Kerton, who travelled to Germany to holiday with her boyfriend's family, went missing.
She failed to turn up following a 5-week break with the family of her boyfriend Peter Simon in the village of Strasveld near Bonn. She's believed to have travelled via Belgium.
Now, on the anniversary of her disappearance, her father, Phil Kerton, is hoping to renew the search for his daughter and encourage police in Germany, the UK or Belgium to reopen the case.
Now, Louise's father, Phil Kerton, joins us on GBNews. Thank you so much for taking the time. So, start off by just telling us about Louise.
Louise was a very special child to us because she was born many weeks premature, and she spent those weeks in an incubator in a hospital in Sheffield, where I was living then, before she could join us. And she had no problems health-wise about that, but she was on the dyslexic spectrum, although the education authorities in Kent, where we lived, didn't like to recognise that as a problem then. But she ended up going to a small school with small classes in it, which suited her very well, and she prospered great on the artistic side of things. And after that, she had several changes of mind and ended up deciding she would like to become a nurse and become qualified in that. But at that school, she was in the same class as Lucy Blackman, who disappeared and was found dead in Japan, whose funeral has happened a few months earlier in 2001.
Phil, talk to us through the movements that we think Louise made before her disappearance.
Yes, it's rather strange in that her fiancé Peter came back earlier than expected because there were some building materials being delivered to the house that they lived in Broadstairs. The house in Strasveld at the time, Mrs. Simon was doing up. We thought perhaps as a holiday home, though eventually later they did move over there. So he came back, and Louise said to the prospective mother-in-law, well, I wanted to get back in order to be back in Kent at a certain date to officially collect the results of my nursing course, which at the last minute she'd been told by the mentor she was with at the time she was going to fail, much to her surprise, because there hadn't been any suggestion of that previously, and that had depressed her quite a bit. And Mrs. Simon had said, well, come over to Germany for a few weeks, you'll get away from it all, not have to think about it. So she made such a fuss about wanting to get back, which everybody should have known beforehand anyway, that Mrs. Simon said, right, I'll take you into Aachen and put you on the train to Ostend, and you can pick up the catamaran to go to Dover. But she never did appear in Dover. And in fact, there's no independent evidence that she ever got as far as Aachen station. We went over to Aachen, put missing posters all over the city, and travelled on the same train that she would have been on a few weeks later, asked everybody there if they'd seen her. Germany then, and even now, has very little CCTV in public places. It's regarded as an infringement on human rights. So there's none of that sort of evidence that we took for granted. The German police looked extremely efficient, very modern offices, but because this was a possible disappearance in Belgium, or maybe she'd got as far as Kent and disappeared even though Peter hadn't seen her at the port, or Germany, they had a tripartite meeting and decided that the German city police in Aachen should take the lead in the investigation. And we thought, that's very good. German police, very efficient. That's quite right. But as we've seen with other missing people in European countries, such as Madeleine McCann, the attitude of foreign police forces isn't always exactly the same as we have expected from people in the UK. And in particular, the general attitude is that if somebody decides to go missing because they want to go missing, then you shouldn't interfere with them.
And so talk us through kind of how you have felt and how your family have felt. You know, it's been 20 years, I think yesterday, since Louise disappeared. So how, you know, what toll has it taken on your family?
It was a tough time in the first months and first year or so. We were always very busy trying to get the police moving to talking to our MP and then to a Home Office Minister, who then put us in touch with the consul in the right part of Germany, who got hold of the police chief of the Justice Ministry. And after about a year, the German police became very active. But it's a dead trail to follow after that length of time, going and searching the countryside and things like that. It's not a good place to find clues or to people's memories to be that fresh. So we put a lot of effort into getting them moving. We recruited former Scotland Yard Chief Superintendent Di Davis, who ran the Royal Protection Squad before he retired, and another super from Scotland Yard, Bob Moffat, who went around and had a look at what was going on and were appalled at some of the opportunities that had been missed to take the case forward. Made a nuisance of themselves around the police forces, but without actually getting any concrete result of any sort one way or the other.
And Phil, you haven't changed your mobile phone in the hope that you might get a call. There is still hope then, isn't there?
There's a shadow of hope there. We basically, after a year, we decided she must be dead. She'd seen the heartache that people going missing causes to families and friends. If she'd chosen to disappear, she would surely have got in touch with us or her friends and said, "I'm going to disappear." And we'd have had to put up with that. So we said, well, she's either being held hostage or she's fallen ill, or as the time went on, she's dead. We accepted that she is almost certainly dead. What we're looking for is to find out how and why and when and where and why wasn't her body found. It seems as though possibly somebody inadvertently perhaps caused her death or found her dead body and was a person who didn't like the police and decided to hide away the body rather than report it and get into further trouble about whatever else they were doing.
Phil, you mentioned the case of Lucy Blackman, who was who was murdered in Japan. I wonder, obviously that was she went to the same school as Louise. Did you speak to their family? Did you, were they ever support you or give you any kind of advice on how to kind of cope with this?
Yes, certainly. Spoke to both Tim Blackman and her mother, who put us in touch with the Scotland Yard guys, who'd given them some good advice about the way the police were approaching things in Japan, in Lucy's case. And Tim was very active going around. He said, keep people aware of the situation, which is what we have continued to do even now, at longer and longer intervals. Somebody somewhere may have seen something or heard something or known someone who said something that didn't seem very important at the time, but actually is a small bit of the jigsaw that would help, and they could tell an organisation like Missing People about it, who would advise them whether it was useful to the police or not if they didn't want to waste police time. And I must, while I'm mentioning Missing People, commend them for their good advice too.
Now you're making fresh calls now for more leads. What are you hoping to achieve then, Phil?
There are two things really. It's been a good 10 or 12 years since the police actually took out the case files and looked over it. And in that length of time, new ways of critically examining evidence to look for inconsistencies have probably been developed, and certainly new or more accurate forensic techniques are available for investigating DNA samples and things like that. And it's an opportunity to apply these new methods to the old evidence that's on file and specimens that are stored relating to the case. And then, so that's one thing on trying to get the police going again, particularly to look at this chap, the German suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, who, when he was in Germany, was in the same neck of the woods as where Louise disappeared. He wasn't exactly in the same place, but he was only a few miles away. And also any people who saw her or heard about her from in Aachen or on the train through Belgium, in Ostend, in Dover, who knew anything about how she and Peter were getting on at that time, or saw her in and around Strasfeld, the village there, or in Aachen, which is a lovely city just on the border of Belgium and Holland, and Germany, with forests around there where people can get into the forest and get lost and later be discovered in another country.
And finally, Phil, if you could sort of get a message to Louise, what would you want to say to her today?
Yes, just get in touch and let us know that you're still alive and that you're thinking of us just as we think of you. It's an unfortunate thing when a missing person turns up after a long time into the bosom of their family. The first thing they say is, "What do you do that for, you stupid girl?" And but therefore they don't want to come back because they know that's going to be the reaction. But I'm sure Louise will do our best to keep away from blame. We'd love to see her.
Phil Kerton, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this morning. Thank you.